Hi, everyone. This is Emiliana Martin, your host for Revivalist Conversations podcast, recorded yesterday, September 3rd, 2020. The topic of our conversation? Daniel Prude. I'm so tired of talking about Blacks being murdered by cops, but this one was just particularly egregious, and we had to talk. The three of us got together, my friend Bill Breck, and another friend of mine, Barnabas Lazarus, who is from Nigeria and is working on his citizenship here in America. His perspective is quite interesting and very edifying, and I hope you enjoy this really brief, super brief podcast. Enjoy. Today is September 3rd, 2020, and Bill, who's been up since 5:30, told me that somebody died by the name of Daniel Prude. So naturally, I'm laying in bed doing what everybody else does first thing in the morning on Twitter. It's like, yes. So I'm like, what happened? Daniel Prude. I'm like, who's that? So I immediately go to Twitter, type in Daniel Prude. Tell me, Bill, what was it you were mourning about this morning?
Yeah, this was really shocking, and it was, timing. This was back in March, way before the George Floyd protests around the world, and it's really sad. He was naked. It was snowy and cold, and no guns, no weapons. Fortunately, a body cam. He had been brought in for some mental health evaluation, released, and then his brother called for additional help. So it was a cry of help from his brother to get some help.
Should have been a couple of social workers that showed up, not cops.
Yeah, so in the middle of the night, he's just out on this cold street, naked. They just kill him within 2 minutes with a head cover, a so-called spit hood, heavy pressure on his head. He wasn't killed, but he was sent to the hospital unconscious.
And he's been in a coma for all this time?
For months, right? So he died recently. Now the family is reporting what has happened. There was a public press conference at the city hall, and the family was blocked. Protesters were blocked. There was 2 rows of police and riot gear and dogs.
I still find it so terrible. Unusual that the family was not allowed to participate. It was their relative who was murdered at the hands of their police officers. I mean, how dare they?
So there's a lot of questions here. It looks like the investigation got taken away from Rochester and went to, I guess, maybe the state attorney general.
Ooh, Letitia James, watch out. She's going to go, ooh.
Yeah, so we just really
Letitia
don't know.
Is going to be merciless.
But all 6 of the officers stayed on duty, and the ambulance EMTs were there watching and didn't really do anything until like 5 minutes afterwards. It was a super uncaring attitude, to say the least. So this is not Minneapolis. I was just talking to a group this week about can you go back in time and change history, and Minneapolis was the flashpoint, but it should have been Rochester. It should have been many. It should have been
Rochester.
Many of these others before this.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, New York has had a lot of this going on.
New York City, President of the Union, he is evil. He is vicious, in my opinion. He does not give a whit's butt about civilians.
We saw it in his face, in his eyes.
Was it the one who said that the politicians should respect us, they should stop treating us like shit?
That's the one.
Is that New York?
New York.
Holy cow.
And you know what's interesting is that everybody has forgotten what Bill Barr said earlier. Bill Barr said, which was still fucking unbelievable to me, he said that people need to start respecting and treating cops better, or else they're going to find themselves with slowed response times in their neighborhoods, or maybe won't even show up. But he said this. How come nobody's resurrecting that? This is my friend, Barnabas Lazarus.
That's right.
What were your first thoughts when you were watching that video? The very first words out of your mouth were,
It was horrific, just watching that being done to a human being. Watching that video, I could see the guy was already restrained completely, hands tied behind his back, so he wasn't any danger to anyone. The cops who were at the scene were properly covered, had their masks on, something like that. Some of them had like face coverings on. And then to watch them put the speed bag, try to tie it behind his neck, choke him up, was too extra for a person who wasn't of any danger. He didn't have gun, he didn't have clothes. What they do to criminals in some of these banana republic is when you catch the criminals, you strip them of their clothes. So they have a sense of insecurity, or they can't feel a sense of power to attack or to defend. It's very indignifying. This person didn't have clothes on, so if he was of any risk at all without clothes, he's even 0-0. He's completely stripped off his armor, and then to go and have this extra layer of speed bag and trying to choke him and asphyxiate him. Everyone just calm, like they're doing their job, like their job is just to choke and kill. Like it's crazy. And then drag him to the hospital and he's in coma. And how something that is caught on camera and the system, the unions could see these things, wouldn't say anything about it. It's so normal, wouldn't have any preemptive corrective measures, wouldn't question the approach of the officers and all that until how many months later, 4 or 5 months later, maybe. And now the public is beginning to question this. What has happened to the conscience of the police, in my opinion? Can the police be self-corrected in a way? Do we need state attorney generals holding people extra accountable? Do we need leaders of thought, leaders of conscience, calling the eyes of the community to something that is seriously very horrifying at first glance? I'm just completely speechless, you know?
And I'm glad you mentioned leaders of conscience. We do not have a spiritual leader. Al Sharpton is not fitting the bill at all whatsoever. We don't have an MLK figure that is nationally uniting the nation. We don't have that. And so, of course, this whole movement is bubbling up from the people without any spiritual or moral guidance. I mean, it's basic moral, be nice, but there's not a whole lot of Jesus in it, which kind of concerns me. But nevertheless, I'm sick and tired of this BS. I mean, that could have been my brother. But here's the thing. Where the hell was the family in March? Why didn't they say something in March?
My question is, when did the family see the video? When did the public hear about, see what we just
But
saw?
didn't they see what was going on? They didn't watch. I mean, what were they doing? Having a couple of cocktails in the house? I mean, weren't they watching this? Weren't they distressed? Why wouldn't they bring this to the media?
The question remains, what did the family know of in March?
It sounds like, what did the family know and when did they know it?
Yeah.
It's like,
Like, the context, George Floyd wasn't having mental health issues and stuff like that. The context could also be, oh, this person, there are lots of suicides in America. There are lots of people who are committing self-harm in America. And for someone like that who had an antecedent that could be misconstrued, the only justice that could speak for a person like that is the body cams or people who are on scene, the eyewitnesses and all that. So my first reaction is, what did the family know and when did they know what they knew? If the family is knowing like we're knowing now, seeing this body cam released now by the police department or whoever like is being released now, then you really can absolve them of blame, because usually when things like this happen, the PR group in the Department of Police will go and give the family a different story, a smooth ass story. Like, we try to help him, he's in the hospital, he'll be fine, he was trying to hurt himself, his brother called for help. Like, it will look good for the books. It's until the camera shows up that you're like, oh my God, no, that wasn't what happened.
And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming the family whatsoever. What I'm saying is, why didn't they raise the alarm in March? I hear what you're saying about the body cams, but I'm not buying it. The family must have seen what was going on. Surely the family saw what happened.
The question is, if they saw it, then I could now hold them super accountable for it.
Right.
But if the family didn't see what we saw, if they didn't know about what we knew about.
But think about it for just a moment. The police came to help, okay? And suddenly he ends up in the hospital in a coma. Call somebody in the media. Call the New York Times. Call the local Rochester Rag. Call somebody and say, they put my brother in a coma, and all we did was say, please help.
That's true. That's true.
So to a certain extent, the family is accountable for not raising a stink.
That's true. I see the point.
But it doesn't change the fact that the cops were vicious.
The narrative is tricky. Look, unlike George Floyd's case, unlike some other case we've seen, it's like another party that doesn't have a relationship to the suspect in question is the one alerting the police, like maybe the liquor store owner or something like that. In this case, the person who is calling the cops is the family.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scary twist. So
And I've made those phone calls where you have a family member who's just so far off the deep end, you have to call the police.
Right.
And if you think I wasn't watching everything that they were doing to my family member, you're crazy. I wasn't about to let anything adverse happen to them.
Right.
So
I can't play devil's advocate for
no,
the family.
I can't.
I just can't. It's so horrific. I don't think the brother who called the cops didn't see that, but he himself might have a lot of issues he was dealing with to see a thing like that and sit on it all these months. And this is a sad part. Scary things about the black community. This is like what people do to themselves. This is literally shooting yourself in your own foot.
Yeah, and yesterday Bill Barr said that there is no systemic bias. There's no racism in policing. Oh, no. Right now, I'm kind of grateful for the fact that, this is going to sound psycho nuts, but I'm kind of grateful for the fact that we're still sheltering in place here in California because it decreases the number of chances my son will run into a cop. And you see, before, the talk was cooperate, yield, do what they say, be humble. But even if you are, like in George Floyd's case, you're dead meat anyway.
Right.
Look at what they did to that family in Colorado, where they took them all out, had them splayed on the blacktop, including a 4-year-old, and it wasn't them.
Scary times, really.
I'm tired of saying, when is this going to end? I want this to end. But before every move...
It probably wouldn't, because throughout history,
it has to get really bad before there's change.
Usually the oppressor never let out power or never changes without something that is threatening to their own survival and their own existence is being pushed forward on the table. Sometimes it's either a change in the power structure, maybe another world power rises up that is more favorable to the oppressed class and might demand the freedom of those people, or in maybe not another world power but another government that is more sympathetic to the oppressed and might decide to let them free, like during the time of Abraham Lincoln. But chances are that we may not be having any Abraham Lincolns anytime soon anymore, regardless of political party. And a lot of people like the privilege and the comfort that this system has birthed. I don't know when this will be entirely over. There is a sense of entitlement, or I would say entitlement, that's the wrong word right there, but an expectation of justice. Expectation of justice ain't entitlement. It might be entitlement or not, but it doesn't have the cliche baggage with the whole sense of entitlement being. But there is an expectation of justice for the oppressed. Who is going to bring that about? I don't know. But then there also needs to be a preparation for the revival or cleaning up in black and colored communities. There is the dire need for these communities to clean their act together and to solidify.
To what?
Clean their act together and solidify, because some of the things that we do in these communities are self-harm.
Like? Okay,
look at Chicago, for instance. Chicago is not so much cop on cop violence than gang on gang violence and black on black violence and stuff like that. Some of these situations where Minneapolis was kind of different. So this is what some of these Republican politicians used to push back sometimes. And while you're talking about these things, they could show you statistics on black crime or murders that might be fivefold what cop is doing to these people. So that's the aspect of community cleaning up their act. The other time it was in the news and a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old girl was gunned down in a crazy gang fight that it's not warranted. But now it's no more in the news, it's completely died out. But these are like innocent people lost out, but this is not a cop on cop or cop on civilian crime. So argument doesn't come forth so strong if while you're expecting to be treated right, you're cannibalizing your own at that rate. So that is just...
But that still doesn't justify...
Of course, it doesn't justify.
The black on black crime, the key issue with that, honestly, is what we talked about with Stuart Perelliot. He's a pastor in San Quentin. The issue is fatherlessness. A lot of these black kids, the father is either absent or abusive or violent and in and out of jail. Consequently, they're more subject to gang warfare and what have you. That's what this is. And this is born out of the lawless police force. The laws were created during slavery, and once slavery ended, the laws were not changed. They were never supposed to favor blacks. In fact, they were supposed to enslave them. hence prisons. It doesn't change the fact that the culture, the police culture, must change. Not might, not could, must. No ifs, no ands, no buts. And I'm tired of giving them an excuse. I'm tired of hearing it. And in this case, I better not even remotely think I heard the cops were threatened. Their lives were threatened. No. That's not what this is.
No, that's far removed from what that is.
This to me is cut and dry. But of course, they're going to obfuscate. They're going to relegate it to something else. And Letitia James is going to kick some ass. I cannot wait.
Yeah, and we talk about the police union, right? They're the ones that are going to come up
They're
with
going to be vicious.
all the arguments, right?
Yeah, if they're of the same ilk as the New York City Police Union, yeah, it's going to be ugly, and it shouldn't have to be. Their peers should be upset with what took place because it puts them in a bad light. Because this incident makes the entire department look bad.
Yeah, so I heard that San Francisco has lost a lot of police officers recently, and I wonder if some of that is they're just thinking twice about whether they want to continue this career.
Good job, right?
But it's not just a police issue; it's a society issue. People don't care about this.
I'm embarrassed to be an American right now.
Well, see, this is the problem. It's everywhere, right? People are shocked. It's in Minneapolis, New York.
But we have shock fatigue at
Right.
this point.
Yeah, but it's everywhere.
It's numbing. When Chad Boseman died, I should have cried. I wanted to. I still haven't. I should have cried. George Floyd should have cried. Didn't. I'm so numb. The post-traumatic stress has kicked into such high gear for me. Maybe I just don't feel safe enough to cry. Maybe it'll all happen that election week.
I'm sure. There'll be tears of joy.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast that we recorded literally on the fly. I would just like to encourage everyone who is a United States citizen to vote because, yes, your one lone voice does count. In one race in 2018, I believe it was, or 2017, it was a tie, and the winner was picked out of a basket, a piece of paper with their name on it, picked out of a basket. So yes, one voice, one vote, your voice, your vote counts. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but just make sure that you do. Furthermore, make sure that you plan ahead for your vote. Be certain that you have made all the proper arrangements. Understand your ballot. Understand what the requirements are for the vote to be validated. Furthermore, I don't recommend sending it through the post office. I recommend dropping it off at your local registrar of voters. It's important this year now more than ever to make a decision and to make a choice. Be sure to bring Jesus into the ballot box with you. So, the Lord be with you until we meet again, which will be an interview with Claire Mack, the first African-American mayor of San Mateo. She's a lifelong resident and she's amazing. She also owns her own bakery business that is most profitable, and it's run out of her home, a true small business. All right, well, I'm gonna go and get busy and start editing all those little bits and pieces for you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your generous contributions and your subscriptions via Patreon. Be at peace. Walk in peace. Peace out.